presenter will be Dr. Jeff Clune from the University of Wyoming. He's going to talk about some of the strange and counterintuitive properties of deep neural networks. And then Kimberly Jackson-Ryan from Draper Labs will talk about trust in autonomous systems. So please welcome Dr. Clune.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to you today about what we call AI neuroscience, which is research into the question of how much do deep neural networks or artificial intelligence understand about the world they operate in. So, deep neural networks, as we've heard all day today, which also go by the name of deep learning, are an amazing new type of AI whose capabilities have just skyrocketed in past years. They just do tremendously interesting, powerful things. For example, they can translate in real time, whether that be text or audio or images. They can turn the sounds that I'm making right now into the words that I'm saying, which previously has been very difficult. They drive our cars, they beat our world champion Go players, and they increasingly are being used in robots in the real world. Now, probably most importantly, deep neural nets have given computers for the first time in history the ability to truly see and understand the world. As you can see here, you can give these networks these pictures, and they can describe the contents of the pictures, the objects in them, and even give you a caption saying, "Girl in pink dress is jumping in the air," for example. But that raises the question of whether or not these neural networks that we're using and deploying really see and understand the world the same way that we do, which is important if we're going to interact with them. So, in a nutshell, a deep neural net, which is a type of artificial intelligence, is modeled loosely on the human brain. There are collections of neurons that you see here, and there are connections between neurons, and there are learning algorithms that, based on data, will tune every one of the connections that you see in this neural network here to try to perform some function, like taking this picture and calling it a lion. However, this neural net, which looks a little bit complicated, is actually puny according to modern standards. Most deep neural networks nowadays have millions of neurons and hundreds of millions of connections that have all been learned automatically by algorithms on data. And what that means is that these neural nets tend to be black boxes, which is to say that even though we wrote the code that causes these networks to operate, and we have that code, we cannot figure out why they do and how they do the amazing things that they do. We simply don't understand how they work at anywhere near a detailed level. And that puts us in the position of neuroscientists, which is to say, here's this complex artifact that we have, it does remarkable things, and we have to reverse engineer how it works by inventing tools to try to figure out what's going on. So the way that we do that, my collaborators and I, is that we try to say, what does every neuron in a neural net do? What does it learn to fire in response to? And one way to do that is to take a neuron and try to figure out, for example, what is the image that maximally activates that neuron? So if it's a neural net that's learned to detect faces or lions or motorcycles, are there neurons in there that detect eyes and ears and mouths and noses? And the technique that we use is we have a computer artist that will generate an image, show it to the network, and the network will say, that's not really a lion. And the artist will change the image a little bit, and the network will say, yeah, a little bit more lion, but still pretty far. And the artist will continuously revise and optimize this image until eventually the network says, ha, now that is a lion. I'm absolutely certain of it. Now you would expect that if you do that, then you would get images back that look like lions if that networks truly understand what a lion is. But in fact, when we launched this process and we looked at these results, and after we determined that it wasn't a bug, we were amazed because the network is absolutely certain that every one of these images here is a starfish or a cheetah or a school bus, an electric guitar, that those are without a doubt 3s or 4s, which is to say that the deep neural net is easily fooled by these sorts of adversarial images, and we published a paper with that title. A related result by a different group found that if you take real images, such as the school bus and the temple on the left, and you make little tiny changes to them that you cannot tell the difference, then the network will go from being sure that that's a school bus to being sure that that is an ostrich, even though to you it still looks like a school bus. Now this attack has been brought out into the real world, so people took an off-the-shelf camera recognition, facial recognition system that was commercially available, put on glasses, put on these fooling patterns on the glasses, and the network thought that this man was that actress, or this woman was that man. Now, you can imagine that there are serious, serious risks to deploying this technology out there in the world, even though we're already doing that, if these sorts of adversarial images and the ability to fool these networks exist, which they do. For example, anytime that your adversary can make one thing look like another to your AI system, bad things can happen. If you have, your adversary can make a hospital look like something that your systems want to attack as a target. They can make this bus stop here by buying an ad on that bus stop and embedding an adversarial image into it, make it it look like open, free road that a self-driving tank or car would happily drive right through, even though in fact it's full of human pedestrians. And there's an infinite number of these sorts of examples out there. So, I also want to emphasize that these are trivial to produce. It takes only a rudimentary amount of machine learning knowledge to be able to produce these sorts of adversarial hacks on these deep neural networks. And one reason is because you do not need access to the target, to the network that you're trying to attack to produce these fooling images. Because I can create images that fool my network into thinking it's a starfish or open road, and I can show them to your network, even though your network might have a different architecture and be trained on different data, and your network typically will be fooled in the exact same way. It's almost like all the artificial intelligences in the world is sitting around being like, why don't humans recognize that these are actually starfish? Silly humans. So it's profoundly deep and deeply interesting. Now, does the fact that these fooling images exist mean that the deep neural networks do not understand the things that they classify? That's one of the things we looked into. So we came up with two hypotheses. One is that the networks actually do understand the space of images that they classify, but the test is actually asking the wrong question. Now, we know from theory that machine learning systems are trying to do, when they're classifying, say, lions from dolphins, are trying to just tell the difference between things. So if lions are these yellow dots and dolphins are these blue dots, they put a line down between them and say everything above the line is a lion and everything below the line is a dolphin. Now, if you then challenge the system to say, what is the most dolphin-like thing imaginable? What is the thing you're most sure is a dolphin? It's going to be something that's very far away from that decision boundary, and that might be an image that's way off in La La Land that's very bizarre and unusual looking, which might be why we got these bizarre images. Now, that hypothesis comes with a prediction that if you could constrain our computer artists to only produce images that are nearby the space of natural images that look like real images, maybe we could recover the dolphin from this system. But there's another hypothesis, which is what our original hypothesis was that we put in the paper, which is that maybe the networks just don't ever learn the true global structure and don't deeply understand the things that they classify. For example, if you see this picture of a starfish here, you might say, oh, if I can see textured orange and a little bit of blue, call it a starfish. And I don't have to learn that starfish, for example, have 5 arms. Now that hypothesis comes to the prediction that no matter how well I constrain my artists, I will never recover a 5-legged starfish from this deep neural net because it never learned that fact about starfish to begin with. So we went about testing this hypothesis over the course of 5 papers over 2 to 3 years, and we used a lot of machine learning and a lot of math to figure out how to constrain the computer artist to only produce images that look like natural images. You're not allowed to go off and produce crazy, fooling images. And what we found were these images here. Now, one column of these images are real images from the real world and our test training set. Another column are fake images produced by the combination of the computer artist and the deep neural net. Can you tell the difference for which is real and which is fake? And if you can't, what implications does that have for fake news and the ability for AI to generate arbitrary media that's indistinguishable from the real thing on demand? This is what the network thinks a volcano looks like. Note the detail on the diversity of what it understands about the space of what it means to be a volcano. And it can do this for 1,000 different categories or more if we had more training data. So we really think these networks do understand the objects that they classify. So going back to the question, do deep neural networks, are they easily fooled or do they understand? Well, the answer is both. And the explanation is, imagine that this white box here is the space of all possible images, realistic and unnatural. Well, if in the colored region is where the natural images live, the probability density of real images. What deep neural nets do is they do something like for volcanoes, make this blue ellipse, which is to say everything in this blue area I'm going to call a volcano. And where that overlaps with real images, they do understand what a volcano is, and they accurately classify it. But if you allow your artist or your adversary to produce images anywhere in the space, then you can get fooling images that are way out there, that either look like a school bus or look like static. So, I also want to point out that fooling images are not limited to just computer vision, to deep neural nets that look at images. Deep neural nets process sound and audio and all sorts of different modalities, and these fooling problems exist there too. For example, you could imagine if you have a voice interface where you give commands to your self-driving tank or your phone, somebody could be playing background music in a cafe. When your car goes by, you could reprogram it, and you don't know that it's been reprogrammed because it's been woven into the music that's being played on a street corner. This is also true of malware classification networks, financial planning networks, robots that learn with RL, generative models, you name it, all of these things have this problem. And it's also not specific to deep learning. It's a general problem with machine learning, and it's actually been known and shown to exist in other types of machine learning, such as decision trees, support vector machines, if you're familiar with those forms of AI. So this is the general problem that we have to wrestle with. So in conclusion, I just want to point out that the neural nets that we've been talking about today as things that we should deploy and we ought to deploy are very easily fooled, even by novice machine learning researchers. They're easily hacked. That means that there are serious risks involved in using them that we have to be aware of, especially if you have an adversary. And that will complicate human interactions with them, because it might give you very bizarre answers if you start asking them questions. But that doesn't mean that they don't understand anything. It means that you just have to coax that knowledge out of them carefully, for example, as I've shown you here today. I'd also say that this fooling problem, which has been around now for a few years, has basically defied the best efforts and the brightest minds. So many, many researchers have tried to solve this problem, and it is not going away anytime soon because we do not know how to solve this problem. So that means that we should continue to research very heavily this technology in general, but also how to solve this problem of fooling and adversarial images. But also it means that we have to plan for a world in which we fail, because in the near term, it looks like that's going to be the world we live in, which is to say that we will live in a world in which the most powerful, most capable artificial intelligence known to humankind is one that's also easily hacked and manipulated by our adversaries. And so we have to be aware of the best way to take advantage of that technology and mitigate its risks and downsides.